If you ask 100 data leaders what their organization needs to make better use of data, you're going to get a load of different answers. Better IT or digital investment. Others will say they need more data scientists. And some will say they need a clearer strategy. Actually, what they all need is the same thing, a culture that thrives on data, and not just data for the sake of data. They need a culture that thrives on deriving insight from data. And that word insight is so key. So we recently did a survey from 60 chief executives about the effectiveness of their data strategy. And as you can imagine, their responses and confidence levels were really varied. But one thing, interestingly, that was consistent was their need to develop a data culture within their organization. Some called it data literacy, some called it data fluency, but this idea that culture is a key driver of the effectiveness of using data was a very consistent theme. And I personally have been taught this lesson again and again in my own data career. Focusing on the technical, process, and regulatory aspects of data, as important as they are, at the expense of culture, is just the tail wagging the dog. And that doesn't work. So data culture is about everyone within an organization being more naturally aware of data as an asset for making the right decisions at the right time. Any data project is really about outcomes at its core, things you want to accomplish. And those outcomes are driven by us, by people and the organizations they serve. And we often assume people know what those outcomes are, but they don't always. And often we start telling them way too late. So this talks about data culture and how to drive it. And we'll talk about a model to begin thinking about it. And that model will hopefully give you food for thought on where and how to focus your own data and insight culture. We're going to start with 5 rules. The first rule of data and insight culture is stop talking about data culture and talk about insight and performance culture instead. Make it about the business outcomes that matter most, and you can drive performance and the best use of data by making those more clear. 2 aspects matter there. One's understanding what your data is telling you about your business outcomes, but the other, that's often lost, is what to do about it to improve the performance of your business or your organization. Rule number 2 is defining those outcomes and how you understand them within your organization. So you need a performance framework to do that. And that performance framework will define your core business outcomes, the KPIs that you use to understand them, and the data you need to measure them. And that traceability is key. If the traceability is broken at any of those 3 levels, your performance framework is going to struggle to work. Another thing to think about is who defines your performance outcomes for your organization? Who owns that decision-making about them? And who is responsible for maintaining your framework as it matures? Rule number 3 is you need to define what a performance and insight culture is for your organization. I'll give you some things that I think matter, but what are those aspects of performance and insight culture that matter most to your organization? It's not just about skills. Skills are important, but it's also about mindset and confidence and clarity of decision making. So the first factor is encouraging inquisitiveness. It's not ask and answer. How many of these did you do? It's how many of these did you do? Why did you do that many? And what should you do about it to improve your outcome? The next is being focused on improvement. So once you understand what we just talked about, it's what we should do to make things better. If we're performing poorly against a baseline, or maybe we're performing well and we want to do even better. Confidence and insight is also really critical. So again, having a clear set of outcomes that people understand creates confidence. Build your performance and insight culture. Once you've built what we just talked about, agreeing your performance and insight culture and what that means for your particular organization is key, so that you know what to measure and what behaviors and capabilities to drive. And don't forget about reward and incentive. You need to think about a way of rewarding the right performance and insight behaviors that lead to an improved outcome. A coaching ethos is key to all of this. Coaches aren't born, they're made. So you're going to have to make them. And you might ask, how do I get started? Well, one, you develop a coaching model. How do you train those coaches? Well, you get some head coaches that then train other coaches in your organization to be able to deliver and support the right performance and insight behaviors. You also have to decide what your coaches do with your coachees. What behaviors and what skills do you want them to train? Is it experience with insight tools? Is it meeting together in small and large groups to discuss performance? Whatever it might be, you need to define what it is that they're going to coach. And the next thing is you're going to have to free up talent to coach. And I can tell you from experience, this is going to hurt because there's a near-term sacrifice. Lots of your most effective coaching candidates are going to be among your best operational and technical managers. And you may need to make a near-term sacrifice to get them into a coaching model so that they can start to drive this performance and insight culture across your organization. Evaluating performance and insight culture change can also be a challenge. You might be asking, well, how do I understand and evaluate if my performance and insight culture investment is working? There are a few things to think about. One is there is a challenge around correlation and causality. So it can be difficult in terms of return on investment to know exactly your culture program's contribution to your performance improvement because you will be making tool investments, process change, or leadership behaviors will be changing, and it can be difficult to know which percentage of the value that we've created is attributable to culture. But you should still measure. And there are a few things to do. One is establish a baseline. Know where you're starting from. So key. Next is get a counterfactual. So wherever you're driving your performance and culture change, try to find somewhere else that's as close to that organization or part of your organization as possible so you can measure what they're accomplishing against the part where you're doing your performance and culture investment. And then don't forget that it's about capabilities and behaviors. Easier, I think, to think about capabilities. Am I confident in using an insight tool? Can I review and evaluate data sets and make decisions about what to do about them? Whatever that might be. But it's also behaviors. How confident am I in looking at data and making decisions from it? What leadership behaviors do I now exhibit that weren't there before in terms of driving performance and insight? So you need to measure both. And you want to create a body of evidence that's both qualitative and quantitative. And it's the mixture of those two things against the baseline and a counterfactual that are going to allow you to see the return, even if it is not in as clear an ROI percentage as you might like. So as we close, I'd leave you with a few thoughts. Protecting your investment in your people. This is really one reason you want to think about performance and insight culture. As a data practitioner myself, it's tragic when we deliver the promise of our digital and data tools and they're there for insight. And for some reason, our organization and our people, they still struggle, or maybe they even reject, in some cases, what you've built because they haven't been shown how to think and act differently, and they don't understand the impact that their new decision-making and behaviors will make. And the castle that you've built sinks into the swamp.